You're listening to the groundbreaking podcast from the Global Ag Tech Initiative. The Global Ag Tech Initiative is the catalyst for connecting, engaging, and fostering dialogue in global food production with technology as the foundation for driving innovation and solutions. The groundbreaking podcast brings forth voices across the industry to discuss trends, best practices, and innovative ideas, driving agriculture forward in a rapidly changing world. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Groundbreaking Podcast. I'm your host, Heather Tunstall, the co-chair of the Global Ag Tech Initiative. And today I am here with Tim Bucher, CEO and co-founder of Agtonomy. Welcome, Tim.
Hi, Heather. Great to be here with you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So first, we want to talk a little bit about Agtonomy for our listeners who may not be as familiar with the organization. And then I want to dig into a little bit about what you're doing right now and what people can expect from the market. So first, can you give us a little overview of Agtonomy and how you've been serving the specialty crops agriculture market?
Yeah, you bet. So we're a little bit different. We've taken a different approach to helping growers in this space. A lot of companies build robots and, implements and things of that nature. What we realized is that the growers have their trusted brands of equipment manufacturers, most importantly because of the dealer network, the service, the parts, the support, right? This equipment is for your livelihood. So our original intent from day one, and it remains to this day, is really to focus on being a software automation company and helping those OEMs accelerate their transformation to autonomy and technology that automates solutions for the growers, right? Because in today's day and age, if you have less and less skilled operators, there's less and less people to operate equipment, which means that the equipment manufacturers, are not going to have a good future, and the growers are not going to have a good future either. So that's why we focus on the platform, if you will.
Great. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Agtonomy launched in 2021, correct?
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
4 years ago.
So how has the company evolved since then?
Well, a lot of things have evolved. First of all, I think the technology is accelerating like crazy. I mean, in today's world of AI, you're seeing, step functions everywhere. And, in these industrial markets, such as agriculture, is no exception. Our software platform, our, machine learning algorithms, our overall AI has advanced tremendously. So that's one thing. So 4 years ago, we barely were able to do an autonomous operation in high value crops, like citrus trees or grapevines or apple orchards. And today we're doing it with ease because of the technology and because of the approach we've taken. I think the other thing that's evolved is really the customer sentiment. 4 years ago, I think there was still a hesitation, but the perfect storm has only gotten more perfect in a not good way, right? In terms
Right.
of the combination of things that are hitting growers. So there's a much more openness to embracing technology. And that's also been a big evolution. And then lastly, I think the OEMs have also realized that they have to move faster because of the perfect storm and their future. And they see what's going on in other industries too, whether it's, the automotive industry or other industries and the digital transformations that are happening there. So it's been exciting to say the least.
Sure, sure. Definitely not boring.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so speaking of which, and working with the OEMs and the equipment manufacturers, Agtonomy and Kubota announced a collaboration that will serve the specialty crops market. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Kubota made announcements at the beginning of June of 2025 that they have chosen Agtonomy as their partner for autonomous solutions in their models of vehicles that serve the specialty crop. Some people call specialty crops permanent crops. Some people call that also high value crops. We kind of have that in the same bucket, right? It's not your row crops or your crops that are in rotation like your corn, wheat, and soybeans, etc. So that was really exciting. We had been working with them in secrecy for a while, and they came out and made that public. And as you know, Kubota is one of the top companies in this segment of agriculture. And the initial platform we're on, it's the M5 series, which is one of the most popular series of tractors, including the M5N, the narrow version mostly for vineyards. The narrow version comes in, and the M5 is for all kinds of other crops in the high value crop category.
Wonderful. So, part of Agtonomy's customer service is instituting a technology assurance program for your customers. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what kind of responses you're getting from your growers?
Yeah. So first of all, we work with equipment manufacturers, and you can call that business to business, right? B2B kind of
Right.
model. But we also work with the end customers, the growers, during this sort of on ramp to full automation phase and bring them on board to these new offerings. And in the context of working with those growers, a few years ago, there was some hesitancy, as I mentioned, in adopting new
Mhm.
technology. So we instituted this technology assurance program, which said, hey, look, try this on your own operation, because everyone's operation is different and everyone has a slightly different way of farming. And if it doesn't work, it's a 30-day money back guarantee.
Mhm.
So really making it easier for them to consider renting, leasing, or purchasing these platforms that have autonomous capabilities. And that's been met with, it's been a wonderful thing for them, because a lot of times
Oh, great.
startups, it's like, here, buy this, and if it doesn't work, too bad. And we don't believe in that, because a lot of us, including myself, are also farmers, and we know what you want when you're trying something new, whether it's a
Mhm.
high-tech product or even just a normal product, if you will.
Absolutely. And, speaking to that and, the need for some of this adoption, a lot of times we hear about challenges and barriers to adoption when it comes to ag tech. So, from your thought, what is needed to make some of these advancements more accessible or more practical?
Yeah, that's a really good question. As I mentioned at the beginning, there's been a much more accepting grower community for technology. So I think that hurdle has gotten lower,
Hmm.
mainly because of their need. But in on top of that, I think one of the most important things we've seen is collaboration with the growers. One of the things I love to do, and as a matter of fact, all day yesterday I was with a grower, and is listening to the grower about what their pain points are. We've had many features that we've added in our software because of the grower. I always like to say more than 80% of our features come from the grower. So the grower collaboration is super important, right? We don't want to just work with a grower that says, yeah, give me the solution and see you later. We want to work together to improve it even more, because we're at this early stage of full autonomous operation in these category of crops. And I think that's, it's good for the grower, it's good for Agtonomy, it's good for the OEM, and it continues to advance the overall industry segment. A lot of people in California, where there's, California, Oregon, and Washington is kind of where specialty crops, high value crops, permanent crops, same category there. About 80% of the United States production of those crops comes from those three states. And in California in particular, there's been I'd say a lot of confusion about regulatory issues. And
Hmm.
that confusion is quite simplified. I'm actually on the advisory committee for Cal OSHA in California, and you can operate autonomously as long as there's no humans around. So, robots that collaborate with humans are technically not allowed, but we don't have any humans around, our solutions when you're out there in these, 5,000 acre orchards or, multi-thousand
Right.
acre vineyards, et cetera. And so that's definitely allowed. And there's been good progress on clarifying all that just over the last, I would say, 9 to 12 months or so. And I think there it's collaboration as well, right? It's not about trying to go up against the regulatory agencies. It's really working with them, and that's another thing. And working with the government too. The governments, I should say, because every state is different, right? California really loves to see electrification in agriculture. Okay, that's fine. Washington is more about automation and providing grants for that. So it's been a wonderful journey so far, and I think it's only going to get better as the technology, the collaboration, the grower need, and ultimately the ROI for the grower proves out in spades. So good times are ahead.
Awesome. And speaking of looking ahead and taking a look at how fast some of these technologies are advancing, how do you see ag tech AI evolving over the next couple of years?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do at Agtonomy, and one of the things that, Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, always talks about is, what's beyond generative AI? And he talks about physical AI. And you see it right now, the hottest high-tech companies are humanoid companies. There's a gazillion of them now. And so what you're doing is you're creating on board, whether it's a robot or a tractor or a vehicle, onboard technology that can resolve issues itself, right? And we
Hmm.
call it physical AI. And that's what Jensen always talks about is what's beyond generative AI, it's physical AI. So that's what we've been doing since day one. And that continues to evolve. So how does it evolve? Well, or what does it mean to evolve? It means that if you do encounter things out there, that you're able to understand, have a better situational awareness in your software, your AI, to
Okay.
basically make decisions on your own. So here's an example. You're out there in the orchards, the tractor's out there in the orchards, and a dog comes by. Being able to classify that as a dog, as an animal that has dynamic characteristics to it, meaning it can run away, it can walk away. Instead of contacting the supervisor of the fleet of tractors, our software basically knows, okay, instead of contacting Tim, if I'm the one that's managing 20 vehicles, I will honk the horn, maybe wiggle the front feet or the front wheels, and try to get the dog out of the way before I would contact Tim. And so the smarts continue to get better and better at those kind of situations like, oh, that's a rock. And the only way I can get around that is I have to back up and skip that row. And so that type of physical AI is what we've been doing, what we continue to evolve and evolve it to the point where I see the future being kind of a super farm agent, right? We all hear about AI agents and AI agents, assist you with things, right? And what the farmer wants is they don't want data and they don't just want analytics of that data. They ultimately want to get the job done. So
Yes.
if you can take in all this data from different services, right? Agtonomy is also working with data analytics companies. We work with implement companies. We work with tractor manufacturers. And if you can take in all this data and then present the grower with the opportunity to hit an easy button by saying, hey, I know there's a weather front coming in. We've got this powdery mildew that's brewing because of this other service that was out there checking it. We think you should spray at 9:03 a.m. on Friday. And by the way, we have 10 autonomous tractors and these sprayers. And if you just hit the easy button, we'll make it all happen for you. So the farmer is still in control, which is super important,
Hmm.
but it makes their life easier, especially during these challenging times with labor and whatnot. We call it the farm agent of the future, and it's actually getting more and more real every day.
Wow. Okay. So truly data-based decision making in practicality here. So that's amazing. So speaking of technology and the evolution of it and the conversations that are being had in the market, there's a lot of focus on ag tech and the adoption rate and what will be coming down the pike in the next few years. What do you think are some of the topics that are going to dominate conversations?
Well, one of the most important conversations that I think continues to come up is what's working and what's not working,
Yes.
right? When you have this focus, you don't just want to focus on ag tech, you want to focus on what kind of solutions, what kind of ag tech solutions are actually helping the growers.
Hmm.
And that's a question that I'm sure will come up. And I'm sure there will be discussions about the different approaches that are being taken. And it's not just about technology approaches, it's also about business model approaches. Today you see a lot of, startup companies that are building machines, even all the way to building tractors. Is that working? Well, it's very capital intensive and the growers aren't necessarily comfortable with startup brands for their equipment and don't necessarily have the dealer network to support them. And then there's companies that make, let's say implements that carry, and that's having more success. And then there's companies that are providing platforms, and I think that's the category that's having the most success right now. And in my opinion, will continue to, because that's the only way to really scale, right? Think about it. If you're building a machine and it costs, $100,000 each machine, well, that takes a lot of capital to build that up and get the distribution network and everything. You're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. And you don't necessarily, achieve the volume that you need, right? When you have millions of tractors that are being sold over the next 4 years, and you've built, only 100 in 8 years, there isn't the impact there. So
Right.
we as a community need to look at solutions that are really making impact, because that's ultimately what growers need. That's ultimately what agriculture needs. And I think that would be a good topic that will be discussed here a lot, amongst other topics, of course.
Yes. Tim, any parting thoughts that you may have for our audience that we didn't cover already?
One thing that I think a lot of folks in ag discuss these days is the doom and gloom. And
Yeah.
I look at it a little bit differently, right? When there are challenges, that's when innovation really rises to the top. And that's when you collectively as a community come up with solutions that work for these challenging times. And that's why I'm so excited, because I don't see this as a time of doom and gloom. I see this as a time of opportunity for growers to make their operations a lot more efficient, to help them with, all the challenges that they do experience. And so I think it's the most exciting time in agriculture in history, which is why, we're so passionate at Agtonomy about doing what we do. So I encourage your listeners to not look at the ag business as a challenge, as too big of a challenge right now, but more as an opportunity with all these amazing ag tech solutions that are coming out and that are working today.
I love that. And honestly, what industry is more resilient than agriculture in the history
That's
of the
right.
world?
That's exactly right.
So,
By the way, I grew up a farmer. I am a farmer. I have my own farm. And the one thing I always tell people, because they say, "Oh, Tim, you're such a Silicon Valley entrepreneur." And I say, well, it's really because I'm a farmer, because farmers are the most entrepreneurial folks in the world, right? If you
right,
have a challenge, you become a welder, construction, you're a veterinarian, you're like everything, right? And
right.
it's kind of the most innovative uh, occupation in the world. I'm cheering for the farmer, and I'm helping the farmer, and I'm super excited about that.
Well, love to hear it. Love to hear you continuing that long, long tradition of innovation in agriculture. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and what you're doing at Agtonomy, but overall where this industry is going right now. It's really, as you say, it's very exciting and starting to solve some of the challenges that have been long standing. So thank you, Tim, very much for your time today and for sharing your expertise. For more on Agtonomy, our listeners can head to agtonomy.com. That's AGTONOMY.com. Also, check them out on YouTube. Search Agtonomy on YouTube. See how some of this works. You can watch a lot of the technology in action in some of these videos. So again, Tim, thank you so much for your time, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Heather. It was great to be with you. Take care.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Groundbreaking Podcast from the Global Ag Tech Initiative. You can subscribe to our podcast at globalagtechinitiative.com by clicking on the podcast tab in the menu, or by subscribing to our channel on iTunes or wherever you find your podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the Global Ag Tech Initiative's weekly e-newsletter, The Signal, for all things ag tech. Visit globalagtechinitiative.com and click on the Signal subscribe button on the right-hand side of the home page. Of course, you can also find us on LinkedIn. Just search for Global Ag Tech Initiative. The Global Ag Tech Initiative and the Groundbreaking Podcast are produced by Meister Media Worldwide. I'm Heather Tunstall, co-chair for the Global Ag Tech Initiative. Thank you for joining us today.